There is a particular kind of smile that takes years to develop. Not a happy smile, not a polite one, not even the tight, controlled smile you give someone when you are angry and choosing to be dignified about it. I'm talking about the smile of a woman who knows something that the person across from her does not know. The smile of someone who has already played the final move in a chess game that her opponent doesn't realize has been in progress for 3 years. I wore that smile on a Thursday afternoon in October, sitting at my own kitchen table, while my son, Marcus, placed a stack of papers in front of me and said with the particular tone of a man who believes he is managing a situation, "Mum, we just need you to sign these. It's just a formality. It's for the best." He said, "It's for the best," the way people say things that are for their best and not yours. His wife Dara sat beside him. She was not smiling. She was watching me with the careful attention of someone who had spent months engineering this moment and wanted to make sure it arrived correctly. I looked at the papers. They were transfer of title documents. For this house, the house I have lived in for 31 years, where I raised my children, where my late husband Harold spent his last good years, where the kitchen still smells faintly of the rosemary I planted outside the window a decade ago. They wanted me to sign over the deed, to Marcus, to him and Dara jointly with a note attached explaining that I would retain residential rights until my death, meaning I could continue living here as a guest in my own home with their name on the title. I looked at the papers. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Dara, and I smiled. "Of course," I said. I picked up the pen he had placed on the table. I signed every page they put in front of me. Marcus's shoulders dropped with relief. Dara's expression softened for the first time in what felt like a year. "Thank you, Mom," Marcus said. "This is really the right thing." "I know," I said. And then I set the pen down and said very gently, very calmly, "You'll want to speak with your own attorney before you try to file those." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "The house," I said, "has been in a revocable living trust since 3 years ago. Those documents you just had me sign transfer a deed that I no longer hold in my personal name. They're not invalid exactly, but they're not going to do what you think they're going to do." Silence. Very complete silence. Dara's face went through 3 different expressions in about 4 seconds. "What trust?" Marcus said, very quietly. "The Elaine Whitmore Family Trust," I said. "Established in October 3 years ago by my estate attorney with full legal documentation. The house, along with my investment accounts and certain other assets, is held in the trust. I am the trustee during my lifetime. Upon my death, the assets are distributed per the trust terms." Marcus stared at me. "The trust terms," he said slowly. "What are the trust terms?" "The assets are distributed equally among my grandchildren," I said. "Each grandchild receives an equal share, not through their parents, directly to them held in individual subtrusts until each reaches 25 years of age." The silence that followed was the longest silence I have ever sat inside. I got up, put on the kettle and made tea, because I had been waiting 3 years for that moment. And I had learned a long time ago in a life that had taught me many things that the most powerful response to people who try to take what is yours is not anger. It is preparation. My name is Elaine. I am 68 years old. I live in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, the same house my husband Harold and I bought when we were 37, when the children were young and the neighborhood was newer, and the oak tree in the backyard was still small enough to see over. The oak tree now shades half the yard. I consider it a friend. I was a high school English teacher for 26 years. Before that, I worked in my family's small accounting office for 7 years, while Harold finished his degree and got his career established. I understand numbers better than most English teachers. I also understand narrative, the shape of a story, the way events build toward a conclusion, the difference between what people say they want and what their actions reveal they actually want. These 2 skills together, financial literacy and the ability to read a story clearly while it is still in progress, are what kept my house. Harold died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer diagnosed in August, gone by February. The speed of it was merciful in some ways and devastating in others. He was 63 years old. He had plans. We had plans. I will not spend a great deal of time on Harold's death. Not because it doesn't matter. It matters enormously. It is the ground under everything I will tell you. But because this story is not about grief. It's about what happens after grief, when certain people look at a widow who is 70, who lives alone in a 4-bedroom house, and see not a person, but an asset. Harold and I had 2 children, Marcus, who is 41, and his younger sister Joanna, who is 38. I want to be precise and fair about both of them, because fairness is important to me, and also because the full picture is necessary for you to understand what happened. Joanna lives in Asheville with her husband Terence and their 2 daughters, Mia and Lily. She works as a pediatric nurse. She is the kind of person who calls on ordinary Tuesdays for no particular reason, who sends cards with handwritten notes, who showed up at my door with groceries 3 days after Harold's funeral and stayed for a week and asked me specifically and repeatedly what would actually help, rather than assuming she knew. She is in the truest sense a good daughter. I love her without complication. Marcus is more complicated. Marcus is my firstborn, which means I have loved him the longest and known him the most thoroughly, including the parts that are harder to love. He is intelligent, a mortgage broker, sharp with numbers, comfortable with negotiation. He is capable of great warmth when he is not focused on something he wants. He has his father's jaw and his grandmother's eyes, and a particular stubbornness that I recognize because it came from me. He married Dara 12 years ago. Dara is from a large family in Atlanta. 4 siblings, a mother who runs her household with what I would describe as strategic efficiency. Dara manages her own household the same way. She is organized, decisive, and has a clear sense of how resources should be distributed and who should benefit from them. I do not dislike Dara. I want to say that clearly. She is not a villain. She is a person who saw an opportunity and pursued it, and I cannot entirely blame her for that. What I can say is that the opportunity she saw was not hers to take, and the method she used to pursue it required treating me as though I had already become a person of diminished capacity, someone who needed to be managed rather than consulted, guided rather than respected. That is the part I could not allow. Marcus and Dara have 2 children, Tyler, who is 10, and their daughter Priya, who is 7. I love them both completely. They are part of why the trust is structured the way it is. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Let me tell you about the house. Harold and I bought this house for $187,000 in 1993. In the current market, it is worth approximately $640,000. It is a 4-bedroom colonial on a corner lot with a double garage, a sunroom. Harold built himself over 2 summers, the rosemary garden and the oak tree. It is paid off. It has been paid off for 11 years. There is no mortgage, no lien, no financial obligation attached to it of any kind. It is mine. Completely, clearly unencumbered mine. After Harold died, I had several conversations with my estate attorney, a woman named Patricia Lowe, whom I had first hired in my late 40s to do basic will work and had trusted ever since. In those conversations, we discussed the various ways to structure my estate to ensure that my wishes were carried out cleanly and without the kind of family conflict that Patricia, in her 25 years of estate work, had seen tear apart too many families. Your biggest risk, Patricia told me in the pragmatic tone I appreciated about her, is not the IRS. It's the family members who will have opinions about what you should do with your assets before you die. At the time, I smiled and said I didn't think that applied to my family. Patricia smiled back with the patience of someone who has heard this many times. Let's structure things properly anyway, she said. So we did. The Revocable Living Trust was established 18 months after Harold died, which means it has been in place for about 4.5 years now, though Marcus and Dara's pressure campaign only began in earnest about 2 years after that. The trust is called the Elaine Whitmore Family Trust. As trustee during my lifetime, I retain complete control over all assets. I can buy, sell, modify, spend. The trust does not limit my freedom in any way while I am alive and competent. What it does do is establish a clear, legally binding, probate-avoiding transfer of assets upon my death. The terms Patricia and I settled on are straightforward. All assets in the trust. The house. The investment account's certain personal property are to be distributed equally among my grandchildren. Not to my children. To my grandchildren, Tyler and Priya on Marcus's side, Mia and Lily on Joanna's side. 4 equal shares, held in individual sub-trusts until each grandchild turns 25. Why grandchildren rather than children? This is the question I imagine some of you are asking. The answer is because my children are adults with their own careers, their own incomes, and their own financial lives. They do not need an inheritance to survive or to thrive. My grandchildren are children, and a financial foundation when they reach adulthood, for education, for a first home, for starting a life, is a genuinely meaningful gift that could change the trajectory of their futures. This was Harold's philosophy too. We had discussed it many times. He would have made the same choice. There was also a secondary consideration that I will be honest about. I wanted to ensure that the house and the assets I had built over a lifetime remained protected from anyone's ability to pressure or coerce or manipulate their way into receiving them ahead of their time. I did not know when I set up the trust exactly what form that pressure would take. I was simply, as Patricia had taught me, being PR. It began as these things often do, with a reasonable-sounding suggestion. It was a Sunday in November, about 2 years after the trust was established. Marcus and Dara had come for dinner, a regular occurrence that I always looked forward to, because Tyler and Priya would run through the house with the specific energy of children who know they are allowed more latitude at grandma's than at home, and the house felt inhabited in a way it doesn't when I'm alone. After dinner, after Tyler and Priya had been settled in the sunroom with a movie, Marcus stayed at the table with a second glass of wine, while Dara helped me clear the dishes, which she did not always do, so in retrospect, I should have noticed this. "Mum," Marcus said, when Dara came back from the kitchen and sat down beside him. The particular way he said it with a weight of preparation told me this was not casual conversation. "Yes. Dara and I have been talking," he said. "And we've been thinking about your situation." "My situation?" I repeated. "Just logistically, the house. You're here alone, it's a big property, there's upkeep. We worry." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "We've been thinking," Dara said in her smooth, organized way, "about whether it might make sense to think ahead about the house, about how to make the transition easier when the time comes." "What transition?" I asked. "Well," Marcus said, "eventually you'll either need more support than you can manage alone here, or the house will become part of the estate. And estate processes can be complicated. Probate takes forever. There are taxes, there are delays. We've seen friends go through it, and it's a lot of unnecessary stress." "If the house were in your name," Dara said, "or in both our names jointly, it would be a much simpler process. It bypasses probate entirely. The transfer would be seamless." I looked at her. I looked at Marcus. I thought about Patricia Lowe and her 25 years of experience with families who thought this wouldn't happen to them. "That's thoughtful of you both," I said. "Let me think about it." "Of course," Dara said. "No rush." There was in her voice the very faint echo of a person who does intend there to be a rush eventually. I drove to Patricia Lowe's office the following week. I told her about the dinner conversation. She nodded in the way of someone receiving information that confirms something she already suspected. "So it's beginning," she said. "It appears so," I said. "Your trust is completely in order," she said. "The house cannot be transferred without your explicit action as trustee. Any documents they ask you to sign that purport to transfer the house out of the trust are legally ineffective. The property isn't held in your personal name anymore, and hasn't been for years." "I know," I said. "I just want to make sure I understand all of my options." "Your option," Patricia said, "is to smile and say you'll think about it. Indefinitely. I almost laughed. And if they push, then you keep smiling, she said. And if it escalates to the point where you need to take action, we have everything ready. I went home. I thought about the conversation at dinner. I thought about Marcus's voice, the particular quality of it, the way it had been calibrated to sound like concern while carrying the weight of a plan. I opened my notebook. I've always kept notebooks, an old teacher's habit, and I wrote November 12th. Marcus and Dara raised the house question for the first time. Dara led. Simpler process. Seamless transfer. I kept the notebook. Over the next 18 months, the house question was raised 11 more times. I counted. It's in the notebook. Each conversation followed a recognizable pattern. It would begin with something genuine, a concern about a leaky faucet, a question about my health, a comment about the neighborhood. And then, with the careful inevitability of water finding a downhill path, it would arrive at the house. The framing shifted as time went on in a way I found instructive. In the first several conversations, the framing was logistical. Probate is complicated, transfer is easier now, we just want to protect you. When that framing didn't move me, it shifted to financial. Mum, do you know what estate taxes look like right now? We've talked to a financial advisor, and there are real advantages to transferring now rather than later. The market isn't going to stay where it is. When that framing also didn't move me, it shifted, and this was the shift I had been watching for to emotional mom. We just want to know that the house stays in the family. We want to protect what you and Dad built. Don't you want that too? The invocation of Harold was, I will say, the sharpest thing they did. Not the sharpest in terms of strategy, but the sharpest in terms of how it felt. I sat with that one overnight. In the morning, I wrote in my notebook, the Harold argument, deployed March 8th. What you and Dad built. Assume this will be used again. It was used 3 more times. I would like to tell you about the incident I think of as the tax appointment. About 14 months into the pressure campaign, Marcus called me on a Tuesday to say that he had made an appointment for me with a financial advisor, a man named Kevin, who turned out to be the husband of one of Dara's college friends, to review my estate situation and make sure everything was optimized. I want you to note that he made the appointment. He scheduled it. He told me the date and time and said, I'll drive you. I went. Kevin was a pleasant man who walked me through a presentation that had clearly been prepared in advance and was oriented specifically toward demonstrating the advantages of transferring property to family members during one's lifetime, as opposed to through an estate process. The presentation was not wrong exactly. The things he said were technically accurate, but the picture he painted was selective. It omitted, for instance, the significant protection a trust provides against exactly this kind of pressure. It omitted the tax implications of a gift transfer versus a trust distribution. It omitted a number of things that a genuinely objective financial advisor reviewing my full situation would have raised. I sat through the presentation politely. At the end, Kevin said, So given all of this, I think a straightforward property transfer to Marcus and Dara would really be in your best interest moving forward. I looked at him for a moment. Kevin, I said pleasantly, do you know what a revocable living trust is? A pause. Of course, he said. And are you aware, I said, that property held in a revocable living trust is already protected from probate, already structured for seamless transfer, and already optimized for estate purposes in precisely the ways you've been describing? A longer pause. Well, that depends on the specific trust terms. My trust terms are very specific and very well drawn, I said. I work with Patricia Lowe. Do you know Patricia's firm? He did know Patricia's firm. Everyone in Charlotte's estate law community knew Patricia's firm. She's very good, he said a little carefully. She is, I said. So you'll understand when I say that my estate is already optimally structured, and a property transfer of the kind you're describing would actually complicate rather than simplify things considerably. Marcus, who had been sitting slightly behind me, was very quiet for the duration of this exchange. On the drive home, he said nothing for about 10 minutes. Then he said, You already have a trust. It was not a question. I established it a while back, I said. After your father died. Patricia recommended it. Why didn't you tell us? He said. I looked at him. Should I have? I said. He didn't answer. We drove the rest of the way in silence. I want to be honest about that drive. I felt something complicated. Not victory, it was too early for that. Not entirely anger either. What I felt was something closer to sadness. The particular sadness of a mother who is sitting next to her son in a car and understanding fully and clearly that the conversation they are not having is the most important one. That his wife had arranged a financial presentation designed to pressure his mother into signing over her house, that he had driven her to it, that he had sat behind her while a man delivered a one-sided argument, that he had said nothing in the room. I did not raise any of this in the car. I said, "Thank you for driving me." He said, "Sure, Mum." We pulled into my driveway. I got out. I went inside. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I called Joanna. Joanna answered on the second ring, as she almost always does. "Mum, hi. What's going on?" I told her. Not everything, not all 18 months of it. Not every conversation, not the notebook, but the broad outline. The dinner conversation that started it. The framing shifts. The financial advisor appointment. When I finished, there was a silence. "Mum?" Joanna said. And in her voice was something that was partly anger and partly pain, and entirely the sound of a person who loves you encountering information they wish they didn't have. "It's okay," I said. "It's not okay," she said. "Marcus set up a meeting with someone to convince you to sign over the house. That's Mum, that's not okay." "I know," I said, "but I want you to understand that I'm not in danger. The house is fully protected. I'm telling you because I don't want you to be blindsided if this continues to escalate, and because you deserve to know what's happening in your own family." A pause. "Does he know about the trust?" she asked. "He knows one exists," I said. "He doesn't know the terms." Another pause. "Should I call him?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not yet. I'd like to handle this myself for now. I'm telling you so you're informed, not so you can fight it for me." "Okay," she said. Reluctantly, I could hear the reluctance, but with the grace she has always had of letting me make my own choices. "But Mum," she said, "if it gets to a point where you're not comfortable, then I'll tell you," I said. "Promise." "Promise," I said. We talked for another half hour about her girls, about Terence's new job, about a trip they were planning. Ordinary things, the texture of a life being lived. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, less alone. After the financial advisor incident, there was a quiet period of about 3 months. I do not know what was discussed between Marcus and Dara during those 3 months. I only know that when the campaign resumed, it was different. The patient framing-based approach was largely abandoned. What replaced it was more direct pressure and the involvement of new voices. The first new voice was Dara's mother, Claudette. I had met Claudette perhaps a dozen times over the years. She was a formidable woman, impeccably put together, highly intelligent, with an absolute command of a room. She and I had always had a slightly formal but mutually respectful relationship. One Saturday afternoon, she appeared at my door with a coffee cake, which I found charming, right up until the moment she sat down at my kitchen table and said very directly, "Elaine, I want to speak with you about what Marcus and Dara are trying to accomplish." I handed her a cup of coffee. "I'm listening," I said. "They're not trying to take advantage of you," Claudette said. "I want you to understand that. They love you. But they're also trying to plan for their family's future, and the house is a significant piece of that future." "The house is mine," I said pleasantly. "Of course it is," Claudette said. "And you will do with it what you choose. But Elaine, you must understand that Marcus and Dara are counting on that house as part of their long-term financial plan. They have structured their own finances around certain expectations." I looked at her. I want you to sit with what she just said. They had structured their finances around expectations regarding my house, without asking me, without telling me, without any agreement or understanding on my part. My house, which I own, which my husband and I paid for over decades, which holds 31 years of my life, had been incorporated into my son and daughter-in-law's financial planning as though it were already theirs. I kept my face completely neutral. That, I said carefully, was not wise of them. Claudette studied me for a moment. "Is there anything," she said, "that would make you more comfortable with the arrangement they're proposing?" "No," I said, "because the arrangement they're proposing isn't something I'm interested in. I appreciate you coming, Claudette. The coffee cake is lovely." She understood that the conversation was over. She was gracious about it. I will give her that. After she left, I called Patricia. "They're mobilizing third parties," I said. "That's a significant escalation," Patricia said. "I know," I said. "At what point does this cross a legal line? At the point where they present you with documents under false pretenses, or where they attempt to exert undue influence in a way that can be demonstrated," Patricia said. "We're not quite there yet, but document everything." I was already documenting everything. The second new voice was Marcus's friend, Derek, a lawyer, though not an estate lawyer, who happened to mention over a dinner I attended at Marcus's house that he had some thoughts about the advantages of inter vivos property transfers. I listened politely and said, "How interesting." Derek was not expecting this particular combination of words and tone from a 68-year-old woman. He moved on to another topic. The third escalation was the most direct. It was a phone call from Marcus on a Wednesday evening, and it abandoned all pretense of the "for your benefit" framing entirely. "Mum," he said, and his voice was tight, in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager trying to negotiate a curfew. "I need you to understand what's at stake here. Dara and I have made real financial commitments based on the assumption that the house would come to us. If that doesn't happen, if you've structured things in a way that cuts us out, that's going to cause serious problems for our family." I was very still. "What kind of commitments?" I asked. A pause. "We have a second property we've been carrying," he said. "An investment property in Raleigh. We've been servicing the debt with the understanding that the equity in your house was a backstop." I closed my eyes, not from surprise, from the particular tiredness of confirmation. Of having the thing you feared might be true, revealed to actually be true. They had taken on debt, real significant debt, against the anticipated value of my house, without telling me, without asking me, without my knowledge or consent. "Marcus," I said, and I worked very hard to keep my voice even. "You took on financial obligations against an asset that is not yours." "It will be," he said, "eventually." "That," I said, "is an assumption, not a fact." "Mum, I'm going to say this as clearly as I know how," I said. "My house is mine. What I do with it is my decision made for my reasons in my time. I understand that you are under financial pressure. I am genuinely sorry about that. But the solution to that pressure is not my house, and it never was." "You don't understand what you're doing to us," he said. "I think," I said, "I understand it better than you do." I ended the call. I sat for a long time. Then I did something I had been putting off. I called Patricia and told her I was ready to let her prepare a letter. Patricia drafted a letter. It was 4 paragraphs long. It explained in the precise and courteous language of the legal profession that the property at my address was held in the Elaine Whitmore Family Trust and had been since a specified date. That as trustee, I was the sole party with authority over the trust assets. That any documents purporting to transfer title to the property from my name directly were legally ineffective, as I held no personal title to transfer. And that any further attempts to obtain transfer documents through misrepresentation or undue influence would be treated as grounds for legal action. It was addressed to Marcus and Dara jointly. I did not send it immediately. I held it for 2 weeks, thinking about whether I truly wanted to arrive at that point. Thinking about Marcus at 7 years old, with his father's jaw and his grandmother's eyes catching fireflies in the backyard. Thinking about the man he had become, who was sitting across from financial consultants, trying to arrange the transfer of his mother's house. Both of these things were true. Both of them were him. I held the letter for 2 weeks. And then Dara called me on a Tuesday morning and said in her clearest, most organized voice, "Elaine Marcus and I have consulted with an attorney. He's drafted transfer documents that are quite thorough. We'd like to bring them over on Thursday. We really think once you look at them carefully, you'll see that this is the right move." I said, "Of course, Thursday is fine." I sent Patricia's letter that afternoon. Marcus called me 20 minutes after I can only assume he received it. "Mum, what is this?" "It's a letter from my attorney," I said, describing the current status of my estate planning. "You're threatening us," he said. "I'm informing you," I said. "There's a difference." "Why didn't you tell us about this trust?" "Because," I said, "it is my estate, my financial arrangement, my business. I have no obligation to disclose my estate planning to anyone, and I did not." A silence. "Are you still coming Thursday?" I asked. Silence. "We'll see," he said. He came Thursday, with Dara, with the documents, and I signed them. I will tell you why I signed them in part 2. I want to take you back into the days between Patricia's letter and the Thursday visit, because I think they matter, because they were not simple days for me. There is a version of this story that is clean and satisfying the clever older woman, the overreaching son, the perfectly laid trap, the moment of revelation. And that version is not wrong. Those things are all true. But the full version includes the fact that during those days I cried twice. Not because I was afraid, not because I didn't know what I was doing or doubted my decisions, but because I was 68 years old, and I was sitting in the house my husband had built a sunroom onto with his own hands, and my firstborn child had taken on debt against the anticipated value of that house without asking me, had sat behind me in a room while a financial consultant tried to persuade me to give it away, had sent his mother-in-law to my door with a coffee cake and an argument, had spent 18 months treating my home as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. And none of it had come from nowhere. I kept returning to the question of when. When did Marcus start seeing me as an asset rather than a mother? Was it after Harold died? Was it after I retired and the house stopped having a dual income behind it and started looking more like an idle resource? Was it something Dara had introduced into their dynamic over years of marriage, the way certain ideas work their way into a household's assumptions, so gradually you stop noticing they're there? I didn't have a clean answer. What I had was the house, and my trust, and Patricia's letter, and a Thursday appointment, and one other thing which I want to tell you about now, because it mattered more than anything else in those days. I had a conversation with my granddaughter, Mia. Mia is Joanna's oldest. She was 12 at the time. Joanna had driven down from Asheville for a visit, partly to see me, and partly I suspected, because she had heard in my voice during our phone calls that things were continuing and she wanted to be nearby. Mia was with her. And on the evening before Thursday, while Joanna was making dinner and Lily was watching television in the other room, Mia found me at the kitchen table with my notebook and sat down across from me. Mia has always been perceptive in the way of certain children, the ones who pick up the texture of adult conversations, even when the words are kept from them. "Grandma," she said, "is something wrong with the house?" I looked at her for a moment. "Why do you ask?" "Because you keep looking at the walls," she said. I thought about this. "I'm just thinking about things," I said. "The house is fine." She looked at me the way 12-year-olds look at adults who are giving technically true but incomplete answers. "I love this house," she said after a moment. "I know," I said. "The sunroom is my favorite," she said, "because Grandpa built it." "It was his favorite too," I said. She reached across the table and patted my hand once, with the slightly awkward sincerity of a child attempting a gesture that her emotional intelligence has outpaced her experience with. "It'll be okay," she said. "It will," I said, and I meant it. After she went back to the living room, I sat for a while thinking about the trust terms, about Tyler and Priya and Mia and Lily, about 4 equal shares, about the sunroom Harold had built, about what it means to preserve something not as a monument to the past, but as a genuine gift to the future to 4 children who would grow up and one day receive something solid to stand on. I felt in that moment completely certain. Whatever happened on Thursday, I was on the right side of this. They arrived at 2 o'clock. Marcus in a button-down he'd clearly put on specifically for the occasion. Dara in her organizational mode, a tote bag, a folder that particular set to her jaw that means she has a plan and intends to execute it. I had made tea. I had set out cups. I was wearing my ordinary clothes, the blouse I wear for gardening, and the comfortable shoes I keep by the back door because I had actually been in the garden that morning, pulling up the last of the autumn plants, and I hadn't felt the need to change. I was, in other words, entirely at home. They sat down. Marcus put the folder on the table. "Mum," he said, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Of course," I said. "You're my son. You're always welcome." There was a brief, complicated pause at this, the word "always" doing some work in the sentence that they both heard. "We've had these documents prepared by an attorney," Dara said, sliding the folder toward me. "Professional, efficient. They're transfer documents for the house. We've also included a residential agreement that legally guarantees your right to remain in the house for the rest of your life. This isn't about displacing you. We want to be very clear about that. This is about making the transfer orderly and simple, and ensuring that when the time comes, there are no complications." I opened the folder. I looked at the documents. They were thorough. I will give their attorney credit for that. The transfer documents were correctly drafted. The residential agreement was actually quite carefully constructed, with specific protections for my continued occupancy. If I had held the house in my personal name, these would have been legitimate documents with legal effect. But I did not hold the house in my personal name. I picked up the pen Marcus had placed on the table. He had placed it there with the care of someone setting a scene, and I read through each page deliberately the way I used to read student essays carefully in full, giving the work the attention it deserved before responding to it. I signed every signature line. I initialed every initial box. I set the pen down. I watched Marcus's shoulders drop. I watched Dara's face ease into something close to relief, that particular softening of a person who has been holding tension for a long time and finally feels it begin to release. I let them have that moment. I genuinely let them have it. Because I had been waiting 3 years, and I could afford to be generous with one moment. Then I said, "You'll want to speak with your own attorney before you try to file those." The silence was total. "What do you mean?" Marcus said, and I explained about the trust. I told it in the same way I am telling you now, clearly without drama, with the precision that 30-some years of teaching had given me for delivering complex information. The trust, established 3 years ago. The house held within it, not in my personal name. My signature on a personal transfer meaningless, because there is nothing in my personal name to transfer. The trust terms, the grandchildren, 4 equal shares. I did not rush. I did not gloat, or at least I tried not to, though I will admit that the calm with which I delivered this information had a quality to it that was not entirely neutral. When I finished, Marcus said nothing for a long time. Dara said, "This was intentional." "The trust," I said. "Yes. Estate planning generally is." "You set it up knowing we would ask about the house." I considered this. "I set it up," I said, "because it was the right structure for my estate. It happened to also be the right structure for this situation." "So you planned this," Marcus said, quietly, without the anger I might have expected. Just quietly. "I planned my estate," I said. "I didn't plan your behavior. I didn't plan the financial advisor appointment, or your mother-in-law's visit, or the debt you apparently took on against my house. Those were your plans. I simply had my own." Another long silence. Dara picked up the folder with the signed documents and held it for a moment, and there was something in that gesture, the way she held it, then set it back down on the table, that was the gesture of someone coming to terms with something. "The grandchildren," Marcus said. "All 4 of them equally." "All 4 of them equally," I said, "including Tyler and Priya. Including Tyler and Priya, I said. Your children are 2 of my 4 grandchildren, Marcus. Their share is the same as anyone else's. It is not nothing. He looked at the table. We took on the Raleigh property, he said. Based on an assumption you made without asking me, I said. I know, you told me. And I understand that this creates a real problem for you, and I am genuinely sorry about that. But I cannot. I will not resolve a problem that was created without my knowledge or consent by giving away the home I have lived in for 31 years. I reached for the teapot. More tea, I said. Dara, who had been very still for the last several minutes, made a sound that might have been a very short laugh, and might have been something else entirely. No, she said. Thank you. Marcus sat for another moment. Then he gathered the documents, the now useless transfer documents with my signatures, that would accomplish nothing, and put them back in the folder. I need to think, he said. Take all the time you need, I said. They left. I sat at my kitchen table in my gardening clothes for a long time. I thought about Harold. I thought about what he would say if he were here. I thought, and I know this might seem strange, I thought he would probably say something dry and understated the way he always did when he thought I had handled something well. He would say something like, "You really did prepare for every contingency, didn't you?" And I would say, "I was an accountant's wife for 32 years. It rubbed off." And he would smile. I put the teacups in the sink and went back out to the garden. There was still planting to do. 11 days after Thursday, Marcus called me again. This call was different from all the previous ones. The campaign voice was gone, that particular measured tone he had used for 18 months, the voice of someone managing a situation. What replaced it was something rawer and more honest, which I found in its way a relief. I talked to an attorney, he said. Not Derek, someone who does estate law. Good, I said. She confirmed everything you said. The trust is fully valid. The house is completely protected. My signatures on those documents don't mean anything. Yes, I said. She also said, he continued, that if I tried to challenge the trust on the grounds of undue influence or diminished capacity, please don't finish that sentence, I said. Very quietly. Silence. I wasn't going to, he said. She told me it would be completely without merit and she wouldn't take the case. I'm not telling you I considered it. I'm telling you how I know the trust is solid. I exhaled slowly. All right, I said. Mom. His voice shifted. Not the managed voice, not the campaign voice, just Marcus. My son, who was 41 years old and had made serious mistakes and was sitting somewhere holding the phone and trying to figure out what came next. I need to ask you something. Go ahead, I said. Did you know? He asked. From the beginning? When this started, the first dinner conversation, did you already have the trust in place? I thought about how to answer this. Yes, I said. So you were never in any danger, he said. The whole time we were pushing on a wall that wasn't going to move. Yes, I said. A long pause. Why didn't you tell us sooner? And here is the thing I had been thinking about for weeks. The question I had been working toward an honest answer to. Because, I said slowly, I wanted to see how far it would go. I needed to understand what was actually happening, whether this was a misguided but well-meaning concern, or whether it was something else. I needed to know who I was dealing with. And, he said, I was quiet for a moment. I learned some things, I said, about how you and Dara had structured your expectations, about the Raleigh property, about what you had assumed without asking me. Those were important things to know. So it was a test, he said. No, I said. Tests of intended outcomes. I didn't want you to fail. I wanted you to pass. Silence. I didn't pass, he said. No, I said. You didn't. The silence that followed this was one of the longest I have ever sat in with my son, long enough to feel like something was being laid down and not picked back up. Finally, Marcus said, What do I do about the Raleigh property? That, I said, is a question for your financial advisor. A genuine one, not one Dara's friend hired. I can recommend someone if you'd like. A pause. Yeah, he said. Okay, that would help. Marcus, I said. Yeah. I am not your enemy, I said. I have never been your enemy. And the house, whatever happens with the trust, whatever the terms say, that's not about punishing you. Tyler and Priya's shares are real. They'll be real for the rest of my life and after. Your children will be okay. A very long pause. I know, he said finally. His voice was different, rough at the edges, in a way that told me something in him had cracked open slightly, in the way things sometimes need to crack open before they can be different. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. I know, I said. 3 months after Thursday, I decided it was time to be transparent with both of my children about the trust. Not because I was obligated to, not because anyone asked, but because the secrecy, even though it had been protective and entirely justified, had a cost. It had kept important information from people who, on some level, deserved to understand the landscape of their family's future. Joanna deserved to know what she would eventually inherit. Marcus deserved to know the full picture, not just the part he had been allowed to see when it served a specific purpose. So I called them both on a Sunday afternoon. Not a meeting. I didn't use that word, because meetings have an official quality that makes people defensive. I said, I'd like to have you both here for dinner. There's some family business I want to talk through. Bring the kids. The following Saturday, both families arrived. Tyler and Priya tumbled in first from Marcus's car, charging immediately for the backyard and the oak tree. Mia and Lily came in slightly more sedately from Joanna's Mia, carrying a book she had been reading in the car, Lily demanding to know if there were cookies. There were cookies. There are always cookies. The adults gathered in the living room while the children dispersed to various corners of the house. Joanna sat next to Terence on the sofa. Marcus and Dara sat in the 2 armchairs across from them, the geometry of the room, putting them slightly opposite each other, which I noticed, but did not rearrange. I sat in Harold's chair. I had my notebook in my lap. I had the trust documents on the side table, and a letter from Patricia, summarizing the key terms in plain language, which I had asked her to draft specifically for this conversation. I told them everything. Not with drama. Not with the particular energy of someone making a revelation. I had already used that energy on the Thursday I needed it. This was something different, clear, adult, transparent conversation about a real thing that would affect all of them. I told them about the trust and when it was established. I told them about my conversations with Patricia after Harold died. I told them about my reasoning, the desire to avoid probate, to protect the assets, to ensure my wishes were carried out without conflict. I told them about the grandchildren's shares and the sub-trust structure and the timeline. I told them carefully and without accusation that the pressure campaign of the past 2 years had been observed and documented, and that while I had chosen not to escalate it legally, I wanted both of my children to understand that I was, and had been, throughout completely clear-eyed about what was happening. When I finished, the room was quiet. Joanna spoke first. I want to say something, she said. She looked at Marcus, not with anger, with the particular careful honesty that is her way. I knew something was happening. Mum told me about a year ago in general terms. I want to be honest that I knew. Marcus looked at her, then at me. You knew, he said. I knew you were applying pressure, I said. I didn't tell Joanna about the trust. I told her I was aware of what was happening and that I was handling it. We didn't freeze Joanna out, Dara said, the first thing she had said since sitting down. Her voice was careful without defensiveness. I want to be clear about that. This was about the house, not about choosing between your children. I know that, I said. I'm not presenting it as something else. A brief silence. I owe Joanna an apology, Marcus said, which surprised me, for putting her in a position where she had to keep something from me. That wasn't fair to her. Joanna looked at him. Thank you, she said. Something in the room shifted. Not entirely, there was still a great deal between Marcus and me that would take time to work through, and Dara and I had our own history now that would require its own attention. But something shifted. "I have one question," Marcus said. He looked at me directly. "The terms of the trust, you said all 4 grandchildren equally. That's Tyler and Priya and Mia and Lily." "Yes, and that doesn't change," he said, "regardless of what's happened, regardless of all of this." I looked at my son. "Your children are my grandchildren," I said. "I love them without conditions. What I feel about choices you made as an adult has nothing to do with what I have put in place for Tyler and Priya. Those are 2 completely separate things." He was quiet for a moment. From outside, through the window, we could hear the sound of 4 children playing in the backyard. Tyler's voice giving instructions about something he has always been, a child with organizational instincts. Mia's voice responding with some kind of counter-argument. Priya and Lily laughing at something only they had noticed. The specific, irreplaceable sound of a family. "Okay," Marcus said. "Okay," I said. "More cookies," Joanna said, and the tension in the room, not all of it, not forever, but enough of it broke. Dara came to see me alone in January. This mirrored, I noted, the sequence from the other story, the one I have heard from friends and recognized the shape of. The woman who drives the pressure, who engineers the approach, who comes eventually with something more honest than what came before. She sat at my kitchen table. "I want to explain something," she said. "I'm listening," I said. "The Raleigh property," she said. "I pushed for it, not Marcus, me. I found it. I researched it. I made the financial case. And part of my financial case was built on the assumption that the house would eventually come to us. I knew that was an assumption. I knew it wasn't guaranteed. But I included it in my calculations anyway because I was..." She paused. "Because I wanted the numbers to work, and including your house made them work." I looked at her. "I'm not telling you this to make excuses," she said. "I'm telling you because I think you deserve to know that Marcus wasn't the architect of this. I was. He went along with it because he trusts me and because it was easier to believe my projections than to question them." "That doesn't entirely absolve him," I said. "No," she said, "but it changes the picture." I thought about this. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Because I respect you," she said. "I don't think I showed that very well over the past 2 years. But I've been watching how you handled this. The patience, the preparation, the fact that you let us go all the way through before showing your hand." She looked at her hands. "I'm a strategic person," she said. "I recognize strategy when I see it. What you did, it was better than what I did." I sat with this for a long moment. "Dara," I said, "I have never disliked you. I want to be clear about that." She looked up. "I have found you difficult to trust," I said. "That's different. What you did building financial plans around an asset you didn't own, bringing in third parties to pressure me, treating my home as a problem to be solved rather than a place that is mine, that broke my trust. It will take time to rebuild." "I know," she said. "But," I said, "what you're doing right now, coming here telling me the truth, not needing it to reflect well on you, that is the beginning of rebuilding it." She nodded. "I'm going to hold you to that," I said. "Both of you." "Fair," she said. We finished our coffee. She helped me clear the cups without being asked. Small things, but the right small things. I want to tell you what happened with the Raleigh property because I think it matters to the full picture. Marcus and Dara did consult with the financial advisor I recommended. He was a man named Graham, who had been my family's advisor since Harold and I were in our 50s, thorough, honest, without any stake in a particular outcome. Graham reviewed their situation and told them plainly that the investment property in Raleigh was being serviced at a loss relative to current market conditions, and that it needed to either be refinanced at a lower debt load, rented at a significantly higher rate, or sold. They chose to sell. They sold it in the spring. They recovered their equity, but not the returns they had anticipated. The loss was real, but not catastrophic. They are financially okay, stretched in ways they hadn't expected to be stretched, but not in danger. Marcus told me this on a Sunday call in April, the same way he tells me other things in the measured, honest tone that I have been hearing more of since January. "We're okay," he said. "It wasn't what we planned, but we're okay." "Good," I said. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And I want to ask it as a real question, not as a setup for something else." I've learned my lesson about setups. I almost smiled. "Go ahead," I said. "The trust," he said. "The terms. I'm not asking you to change them. I understand why they are what they are, and I think they make sense. But I want to ask, is there anything I can do, not to change the outcome, but just to be better at this, to be the son you deserve?" I sat with this for a long moment. It was not the question I had expected. "Yes," I said. "There is." "Tell me," he said. "Ask me," I said. "Before you plan, before you assume, before you and Dara build financial structures around expectations, ask me what I'm thinking. Tell me what you're worried about. Not to manage me toward an outcome, but just to actually talk to me. I'm your mother. I'm not a resource to be managed. I'm a person who loves you and would like to be treated as one." Silence. "That should have been obvious," he said quietly. "It should have been," I said. "But it wasn't, and now we know." "Okay," he said. "I'll do that." "I know you will," I said. And I meant it. "I want to tell you about an afternoon in May. It was a Saturday. Both families had come for what I had started calling and what had stuck the oak tree days. Once a month, both families, no agenda, no occasion, just the house and the yard and the children and whoever wanted to be present. Harold had always believed that the most important family moments are not the holidays and milestones. They are the ordinary Saturdays that accumulate over years into something that looks like a life together. He was right about this, as he was right about most things. On this particular Saturday in May, I was sitting in the sunroom with a cup of coffee and a book I was not really reading, watching through the window, while all 4 of my grandchildren attempted to build something in the backyard. Whatever they were building involved branches, a significant amount of dirt, and a tarp that Tyler had found in the garage. Joanna came and sat beside me. We watched for a while in comfortable silence. "Mum," she said after a while. "Do you think Dad would have handled it differently?" I thought about this. "Your father would have been furious," I said. "He would have been considerably less patient than I was." Joanna laughed. "Yeah," she said. "He would have said something in the first 3 months." "He would have said something in the first 3 weeks," I said. "He had many qualities I admired, but strategic patience was not one of them." "Is it over now?" Joanna asked. "The hard part, I mean." I thought about Marcus at the Sunday dinner table, telling me about the rally sale, asking how to be better. I thought about Dara at my kitchen table, taking accountability without asking for credit for it. "I don't think family is ever fully over the hard part," I said. "There are just better and worse periods. Right now is a better period." "That's a very teacher answer," Joanna said. 31 years in the classroom," I said. Outside, Tyler had apparently succeeded in whatever he was building because all 4 children were now standing back, admiring it, some kind of structure involving the tarp, and several branches that looked like it might be a fort or possibly a boat, or possibly something entirely specific to a system of imagination they had created together. Priya looked over her shoulder toward the sunroom window and saw me watching. She waved. I waved back. She went back to the fort. "The trust," I said to Joanna. "I want you to understand why I structured it the way I did. The grandchildren, the equal, shares, it wasn't just about protecting things from pressure. It was about what Harold and I actually believed." "Tell me," she said. "We believed," I said, "that the most important thing you can give a young person is a foundation, not a windfall, not dependency, A foundation, the kind of solid starting point that makes it possible to build your own life. Your father and I were not given that. We built what we had from very little, and what we wanted to give our grandchildren was not a fortune, but a start. Mia would say that's very pragmatic, Joanna said. Mia would be right, I said. She'd also say it's kind, Joanna said quietly. We sat in the sunroom together for a while, watching 4 children build something in the yard under the oak tree Harold had watched grow for 30 years. I thought about what it means to prepare. Not out of fear, not as a defense against people who might want what is yours, though that too, but as an act of love, as the long, patient work of someone who believes that what you build in your lifetime should mean something after you are gone. The trust was not a trap. It was only ever that for people who approached it with the wrong intentions. For the people it was built for 4 children playing in a yard in May, it was simply care, prepared in advance, held in trust. I am writing this from my kitchen table. The rosemary outside the window has come back strong this year. Last winter was mild enough that it didn't die back as much as it sometimes does. The oak tree has new leaves. The sunroom catches the morning light the way Harold designed it to. I am 68 years old. I am in good health. I have, according to Patricia, a well-structured estate that is entirely in order and requires no immediate attention. I have 2 children, both of whom are in my life. Marcus and I talk every Sunday. Not always easily, there is still some residue between us that will take years to fully clear. But honestly, that is the word I keep coming back to. We talk honestly now, which is something we didn't have for a long time, possibly for longer than the pressure campaign itself, possibly going back years before that, to habits of communication that both of us had settled into without noticing. Dara and I have coffee once a month or so. We are not best friends. I am not sure we will ever be. But we have something real now, a mutual respect that is based on seeing each other clearly, which is more solid than warmth that was never entirely genuine. The Raleigh property is sold. They're okay. Joanna is Joanna, a Tuesday call, a handwritten card, the gift of a daughter who never required managing, and there are the grandchildren. Tyler, who is 11 now, is developing his father's facility for numbers and his mother's organizational mind, which is a combination that makes me think he will be formidable at whatever he chooses. Priya, at 8, has started asking about the sunroom, specifically about who built it and how. I have been telling her in pieces the story of how Harold spent 2 summers building it, how he made mistakes and started over, how the windows aren't quite level if you look at them from exactly the right angle, which is also the reason they're beautiful. Mia, at 13, now still comes to sit with me at the kitchen table sometimes. She has started reading the kinds of books that make you think differently about the world. Books about history, about systems, about the choices people make under pressure. We talk about them. She is extraordinary. And Lily, who is 8, still asks about cookies every single time she walks through the door, with no reduction in enthusiasm or optimism across years of consistent cookie availability. This house, Harold's sunroom, the rosemary, the oak tree, the kitchen table where so many things have been said and decided, is mine. It will remain mine. After me, it will belong to no one person, but will exist as something real and solid in 4 futures. I think that is the right outcome. I think Harold would agree. Before I ask you my question, I want to say something about trust, not the legal document, the other kind. I have been thinking throughout everything I've told you about the difference between trust that is given and trust that is built. I trusted Harold completely, not because he was perfect, but because across 32 years of ordinary and difficult moments alike, he showed me consistently who he was. Trust with Marcus was always assumed. He was my son. Of course I trusted him. Of course he loved me. That is the assumption family runs on. What I learned at 65 and then 66 and then 67 was that love and trustworthiness are not the same thing. You can love someone and still act toward them in ways that are not trustworthy. You can love someone and still treat them as a means to an end. You can love someone and still, in a specific circumstance, reveal that your own interests have outweighed your regard for theirs. I believe Marcus loves me, I also believe that for approximately 2 years he treated me as an obstacle to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Both of these things are true. This is the complicated truth about people. They contain multitudes, including multitudes that are in conflict with each other. What I had that he didn't know about was preparation. Not preparation against him. I want to say this again clearly, but preparation for the kinds of circumstances that arise in any family where there are assets and competing interests and human beings doing the imperfect work of navigating all of that. Patricia Lowe told me 5 years ago, your biggest risk is not the IRS. It's the family members who will have opinions about what you should do with your assets before you die. She was right. The thing that protected me was not confrontation, not anger, not strategic retaliation. It was the work I had already done, the trust that was in place before any of this began, the records I kept, the attorney I maintained a relationship with, the financial literacy that let me understand exactly what was being proposed and exactly why it was not in my interest. And underneath all of that, the thing that made all of it matter was the clarity I had about what I actually wanted, not what I was afraid of, not a defensive crouch against loss, but a genuine positive vision of what the house and the assets represented and what I wanted them to mean after I was gone. 4 children playing in a yard, a fort made of branches and a tarp, a foundation. Here is what I want to ask you, because this is the part of the story where I think different people will land in very different places, and I am genuinely curious where you land. On one hand, Elaine knew about the trust the entire time. Every conversation, every financial advisor meeting, every cup of coffee with Claudette and her coffee cake, Elaine sat through all of it, knowing that the house was already protected. Is there something not quite right about that? Should she have revealed the trust earlier? Was there a point where holding that information back crossed a line? On the other hand, Elaine was under sustained pressure for nearly 2 years to give away the home she had lived in for 31 years. She had done nothing wrong. She had committed no offense. She was being managed and manipulated by people she loved, and the information she withheld the trust was her own private estate planning, which she had no obligation to share with anyone. Is there a difference between keeping your cards to yourself and actively deceiving someone? Is what Elaine did wise, or was it patient, or was it both, or was it something else entirely? And here is the deeper question, the one I keep coming back to. How do you protect what is yours without becoming someone you don't recognize? Elaine kept her smile. She kept her composure. She kept her records. She sat through 18 months of pressure and still called her son on Sunday afternoons and still set out the teacups when people came to the table. Was that grace? Or was it strategy? Can it be both? I want to know what you think. Leave me a comment. Tell me, was Elaine right? At what point would you have said something? Would you have been able to wait that long? And if you are someone who is sitting in a similar position right now, a widow, a widower, a person who owns something others want, who loves people who are not treating you the way you deserve, I want you to hear this. Your assets are yours. Your home is yours. Your decisions are yours. And preparation, quiet, patient, legally sound preparation is one of the most powerful things you can do, not out of bitterness, not out of retaliation, but because you deserve to have your intentions honored, and sometimes the only way to ensure that is to do the work yourself in advance before anyone asks. Thank you for being here. I'm Elaine. The house is still mine, and the rosemary outside the kitchen window has come back strong this year.